Hey, good afternoon. I'm Delegate Ken Kerr, Chair of the Government Operations and Health Facilities Subcommittee. This is a work session of March the 12th, 2025, and we are going through one, two, three, four, six bills this evening. If you were here for HB 1129, we ran into a kind of a technical situation we have to work through. The Senate has already moved the cross-file, and because this involves the Constitution, um, apparently only one of the bills can move or both will appear on the ballot. So we're going to have to sort this out. So I've just taken it off for today. But if you are interested in that bill, just know that it's already moved in the Senate.
What's that bill number?
1129,
Thank you.
Dana Jones bill, the constitutional officers bill. So Lindsay, if you don't have a preference, I guess we'll just start with 333.
Sure. So as introduced, this bill establishes new responsibilities relating to the cybersecurity of healthcare ecosystems, including staffing, reporting, auditing, and the establishment of a work group for healthcare ecosystem entities. The Healthcare Commission, the Maryland Insurance Administration, the Department of Information Technology, and the Maryland Department of Emergency Management. The bill generally takes effect July 1st, 2025. However, provisions relating to the adoption of regulations by MHCC and MIA take effect July 1st, 2028. And then the provisions relating to the healthcare ecosystem stakeholder work group terminate June 30th, 2029. Delegate Kerr, you're the sponsor. You indicated that there would be amendments coming to make this just a work group, but we haven't received those amendments yet. And then I'll also note that the original bill had a high fiscal note, so we would need letters in response to the amendments.
Okay, and last I checked, we had not received the updated amendments or addressed the fiscal note. But since we have called the bill, is anybody here to offer any insight or discussion about the bill? Jake Whitaker, welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We appreciate you bringing attention to this important issue. But that said, I'll just reiterate kind of our sentiment during the hearing that we don't think this is appropriately regulated at the federal level. We did convene a work group in the fall, which included the Maryland Insurance Administration, the Healthcare Commission, the Health Department, and the HSCRC, as well as hospital leaders and providers. We even had additional meetings for listening sessions with some of the legislators on that work group to kind of discuss legislative ideas. But I think the field kind of consistently pushed back and said that this may not be appropriate at the state level because all these entities cross so many different state lines. Additionally, I'll say there is a precedent for a work group at the state level, the State Cybersecurity Council, which handles a lot of these issues and I think has the right people, including federal representation. So we do want to respectfully push back on the work group as it is. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Jake. John Fiastro?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. John Fiastro here on behalf of the Cybersecurity Association of Maryland. And I did want to just reiterate that, notwithstanding Mr. Whitaker's comments, if there is to be a work group, the Cybersecurity Association would be interested in being included by name on that work group. And then, just to press our comments regarding an amendment for that work group to contemplate safe harbor as part of the overall package. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Anyone else to speak to House Bill 333? Okay, then let me go ahead and just hold that bill until we get the documentation we're looking for, and we'll take it up at our next meeting. Can we talk about HB 806, please, Lindsay?
As introduced, this bill requires the Public Information Act Compliance Board to receive, review, and resolve complaints from custodians of public records alleging that an applicant's request or of requests are abusive. If the board finds that the applicant's request abusive, then they must issue an order authorizing the custodian to ignore the request or pattern of requests as specified, or provide any other non-monetary relief that in the board's discretion is appropriate under the circumstances, including an order that the custodian need not respond to future requests from the applicant or another person making a request on behalf of the applicant for a specified period of time. The bill also establishes that a complainant may appeal the board's dismissal of a complaint as specified. The amendments circulated have been worked on by the Office of the Attorney General. The amendments remove from the bill the authorization for the board to receive, review, and resolve complaints from custodians alleging that an applicant's request or pattern of requests is abusive, authorizes the board to stay the requirement for a custodian to respond to other requests for public records that are substantially related to the allegedly frivolous, vexatious, or bad faith request or pattern of requests that is the subject of the complaint, pending further proceedings of the board on the complaint. Specifies that non-monetary relief awarded by the board must be commensurate with the conduct, and if the relief is in order that the custodian need not respond to future requests from the applicant for a specified period of time, that period may not exceed 1 year, and then strikes from the bill any changes relating to complaints made to circuit court.
Okay, thank you.
And I believe the Office of the Attorney General is on the call.
Okay, good. I guess this is there's a lot going on here, so let me go ahead and start talking about it before we move the amendments. Just kind of break the custom here. Let me call on Delegate Kaiser.
Mr. Chair, thank you for the explanation, Lindsay. I just quickly looked at the reprint and I'm just not that smart or that fast to understand, but I think we all maybe understand what frivolous or vexatious is when it happens, but I didn't quite understand how it will be defined and actually in practice. So I'm imagining others may have that same question, and that might be what Mr. Galbraith is going to answer, but I'd love to hear about that. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Galbraith, welcome. Do you have that answer?
Well, I don't have the answer. I'm a citizen here. I don't know. I'm just a concerned citizen. I looked at the amendments, and I believe there are reasons why this amended bill still goes against the PIA's foundational principles, and I'll make 3 very brief points. Section 4(i) on page 2. That has not changed versus the original bill. And under it, custodians can still be authorized to ignore a future request on the same or similar topics as a past request, even if the future request is not frivolous or vexatious. So requests should be judged on their own merits. And with this amended bill, they won't be. Delegate Hill made this point very well at the bill hearing when she said, if this can authorize a custodian to ignore a citizen's future requests, regardless of whether those requests are also frivolous or vexatious, what the heck are we doing? That's a direct quote. And she made an excellent point. So that's the first point I'd like to make. The second point I'd like to make has to do with section 4 III on page 2. Even with the amendments, a citizen or press member can still be banned from making any future request on any topic for a year, even if the future request is not frivolous or vexatious. This is a blacklist provision, and blacklists are never a good idea, be it the Hollywood blacklist of the 50s, Nixon's enemies list of the 70s, or this blacklist. So that's my second point. Third point. The newly added stay language on page 2 after line 8. Requests from other citizens or press members can be considered to be substantially related to a vexatious request if the same subject matter is involved, even though those requests from others are not frivolous or vexatious. They have a different scope, that kind of thing. They ask for different information, but even if they're on the same subject matter, they can be considered substantially related. And a stay can then be put on those requests from others. So this stay language amounts to a stay on requests from other citizens or press members on the same subject matter, even if those requests are not frivolous or vexatious. So this bill, even as amended, goes against the Public Information Act's fundamental principles. And I urge an unfavorable finding for the bill, even with these amendments. The areas of concern that were brought up in the bill hearing have not been addressed.
Mr. Chair, could we also hear from the OAG's office? I think Ms. Clark is here.
Yes, she, or,
Tiffany probably wants me to talk.
Yes.
Yes.
okay, oh, hi, Patrick.
I'm Patrick Hughes. I'm the chief of our opinions and advice division here. So the amendments, the reprint that's in front of you are compromise amendments that we worked with Rebecca Snyder, who's the executive director of the Maryland DC Press Association, and her sort of coalition of groups, the Public Justice Center, Common Cause, ACLU, et cetera, to try to get at some of their concerns about the original bill. Delegate Kaiser, to go back to your original question about how frivolous and vexatious and in bad faith are defined under current law. Excuse me, the current law already gives that authority to the PI compliance board to sort of flesh out in a common law way, case by case, what those terms mean. The compliance board has issued 4 decisions that I'm aware of under the existing provisions of law that have started to define those terms. So that this bill wouldn't really change that. It would continue to leave it to the compliance board to flesh out in a case by case basis what qualifies as frivolous, vexatious, or in bad faith conduct. The changes that are left in the bill, are intended to address situations that custodians and the compliance board have encountered with the cases that have come up so far under this provision to the compliance board, where you have just large numbers of requests that are all related to each other that are flooding both the compliance board and the custodians that are trying to deal with the requests. So again, we worked with Rebecca Snyder and her team to try to tailor these amendments to get at the problems that we in the compliance board were encountering in a way that didn't give them the same amount of heartburn on these issues. And I'm happy to answer specific questions about specific aspects of any of the amendments. But that's the general place that we're coming to you now today.
Thank you, Patrick. Rebecca, you did have your hand up. Do you want to speak now, or you want me to wait?
I can speak now to reiterate, to say, yes, Patrick answered Delegate Kaiser's question exactly. That was what I was initially raising my hand for, but also to underscore that we have worked really hard with the AG's office to come to consensus amendments. We do recognize that sometimes there are problems, and to Mr. Galbraith's point, we do feel like that this is not a blank check to the compliance board or to anyone else, because those requests that are being stayed have to be substantially related to the frivolous, vexatious, or bad faith request or pattern. So we really do feel like it ties in, and we wanted to make sure that sort of the right of first remediation went to the board, which we think was more efficacious, would be able to work more quickly rather than going to court. So we do support these amendments, and it moves us to no position on the bill.
Okay, thank you. Let me go back to Patrick Hughes before I get to you, Delegate Taveras.
Thank you, Delegate Kerr. I was just going to say, in terms of the way this bill is structured now with the amendments, everything is still left to the discretion of the PI compliance board in terms of what it decides to order, and what it decides is, the remedy that's necessary to solve the problem posed by the particular request or series of requests in front of it. So it doesn't allow a custodian to do anything unilaterally. It has to ask the compliance board for its decision on what to do. And the compliance board is a, independently appointed entity appointed by the governor. It has representatives of the public interest organizations or news media organizations on it. So it is a, independent third party that's going to be making those determinations, not the individual custodian that would be making those determinations. I just wanted to clarify that.
Okay, thank you. Let me go to Delegate Taveras.
And I'm trying to see, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm trying to see exactly what we're talking about. I mean, are we talking about, individuals that are citizens that are requesting things, from like the same thing from multiple people, or like the same person making, the same type of inquiry? I just remember when I was working, I thought I was talking with a very stable person, but after the fact, I recall that that person had to be written off on 911 because they would make like 60 calls a day.
Yeah, we had a lot of examples in the bill hearing
Yeah.
about the type that you're asking for.
Yeah, so I must have not had a chance to look that over, or I have to step in the back.
Mhm. That's
Because
entirely possible. Patrick, can you just briefly give some examples to Delegate Taveras?
Sure, of course. So I think there are lots of different categories we could be talking about. One category would be, delegate, as you suggested, a single requester that's requesting the same thing over and over again that they've already been told doesn't exist or whatever. But you also have situations where it's numerous requests all on they're sort of overlapping, all on related subject matter that all come in at the same time. You also, I believe it was cited in Rebecca Snyder's testimony, actually, in the bill hearings. There are two decisions of the PIA Compliance Board that are about where they found that the requests were frivolous, vexatious, or in bad faith, that explains the type of conduct that was at issue there. So there was an example of a multiple requests coming from all of these different email addresses that seem to be related in some way to one another, but purported to be different people sending all of these requests for the same information. So there's not a one size fits all category. That's part of the reason for this approach, where you give the PI Compliance Board the chance to look case by case at what the specific situation is and figure out how to respond best to that situation. But those are some examples. It's not targeted at the press. Certainly, it would not be our expectation that this would be used with press requests, which are generally not made frivolous, vexatious, or in bad faith.
is this settled law?
I'm sorry, Delegate.
Is it settled law? Was that your question, Delegate Taveras?
Yes, in terms of being able to create a list like this in other areas.
I'm sorry. I guess I'm still not sure I quite understand
Can you restate your question, please, Delegate?
Have other people sued over this matter and been able to allow for this to, does this type of
Are you asking, has anybody else done this?
Can I help? I
yeah.
think I know what she's asking, actually.
Yeah, go
Yeah.
ahead,
Yes.
Delegate Alston.
Scary. But I think what she wants to know is, where else in the law do we create these lists of banned people from being able to get information? Is that what you were getting at?
Yes.
Okay.
So this process sort of in general exists already in the law, where custodians can go to the compliance board and ask for relief from responding to frivolous, vexatious, in bad faith complaints. So this really just clarifies the scope of relief that the compliance board can provide in hearing or deciding one of those cases before it to actually solve whatever problem is being presented to it. Because in our experience, if the compliance board issues an opinion saying, this request before us is frivolous, vexatious, and in bad faith, that's essentially a meaningless protection if the next day, the same requester can turn around and, submit basically the same request or something very similar again, and then you have to start the whole process over again before the compliance board. And so this is an attempt to just give the compliance board the flexibility to fashion the relief that makes sense in the circumstance in front of it. It's not keeping a list of bad people. It's just creating a remedy for the particular situation that is in front of it.
Thank you, Patrick. Delegate Chisholm.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would tell you what is settled law. Settled law is the First Amendment of the United States Constitution, and it's pretty clear. And with all due respect to Mr. Hughes, he just made the point that we already have laws to protect against this. And we're not static where we're just stuck in this time frame. This is not the only AG that we're going to have in the state of Maryland. And these people might be acting in good faith, but this can easily be used in a way that keeps the public out. And we're talking about examples. I've got at least 5 emails from the public saying that they feel like they've been held out in this probationary period. There's already in the U.S. Constitution protections such as incitement, defamation, fraud, obscenity, child pornography, fighting words, and threats. All of that is already protected. And I'm happy that the press is at least moved to neutral, because freedom of the press is obviously precious in this country, and they should have access, but so should the public. The press is nothing more than an extension of the public, and we should not be trying to create more and more barriers for the parent.
You hate this PIA bill too? Oh, I'm sorry.
Tiffany.
I'm so sorry.
Okay.
I'm so sorry.
All right. So I'm just saying, okay, I'll just wrap it up because I think maybe Delegate Austin's got something to say too, eventually. But I do think, look, I understand, and I'm very sensitive to the fact that there's some people that try to abuse systems. But the reason we have the First Amendment is because we're supposed to be representatives of the people. And when you stop the people from being able to see what we're working on, then we're no longer representing the people. We're representing ourselves and other departments, and that's not a good place for us to be in this state. And that's all I've got to say on it, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Delegate Austin, you want to continue your comments?
Apologize for not knowing how to use Zoom appropriately. I'm still on the House floor. I guess you've all heard I'm not necessarily a fan of this bill. Delegate Hill is in the waiting room. If she could be admitted. Listen, I do not like this bill. I do not like limiting public access. As someone who was a PIA officer, I had all manner of things sent to me from inmates in our Department of Corrections. It was disgusting. It was vile, but that was the job. And I empathize on a very personal level with the people who are suffering, receiving these things, because I too have received them. But I don't think that limiting people's access or being able to put people on a list so that they are not able to appropriately seek information from our government is the way to handle this. So I don't know that there's any level of amendments that would make me vote for this bill.
Okay. Let me just say up front, I'm not going to call for a vote on this bill today. So if you have your hand up, if you could quickly make your comment. We're not going to come to a decision on this bill today. Obviously, there's some outstanding issues. If you'd like to speak, to this bill. Please keep it brief. We still do have 4 more bills to deal with today. Delegate Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I believe in transparency 100%, but I also know we don't want abuse. So can you tell us about the appeal, the complaint and appeal process? What would that look like?
Sure, I assume that's directed at me. So
Whoever's best to answer.
sure. So excuse me, right now, the way this system works is that any decision by the PIA compliance board can be effectively appealed to circuit court. So the losing party in front of the compliance board can seek judicial review in circuit court. That's already the case. So if the compliance board were to find that a particular request was frivolous, vexatious, or in bad faith and ordered some sort of remedy for that, that decision could be appealed to circuit court and then up through the court system.
So they would have to go to
Judicial
court. All right, thank you. Thank you,
Mhm.
Mr. Chairman.
Delegate Kaiser.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Briefly, one thing Delegate Chisholm said, we might trust this OAG, we might trust this compliance board, but we don't know moving forward. So yeah, I too am not comfortable with this bill. Thank you.
Great, thank you, everyone. Patrick and Tiffany, you've heard some of the objections at this point, and I want to give you a chance to address these delegates' concerns. You know, you can go back and rewatch this meeting, so you can take the notes and make sure that you're able to catch everything that's been brought up today. All right, and then if you can get back to us with some answers, we'll get this back on the subcommittee work agenda.
Thank you, Delegate. Sounds good.
Thank you. Let's go on to 819, Lindsay.
As introduced, this bill would have required the Stadium Authority, public four-year post-secondary institutions, and Baltimore City Community College to establish a percentage preference of up to 5% subject to approval by the Board of Public Works for bidders or offerers that use an employee stock ownership plan. And the price preference applied to covered contracts valued at less than $80 million and solicited on or before June 30th, 2030. The bill would take effect July 1st, 2025 and terminate June 30th, 2030. The sponsor has submitted amendments that remove the application of the bill to the University System of Maryland. So it would still apply to the Stadium Authority, BCCC, Morgan State, and St. Mary's. Authorize rather than require these units to establish the ESOP preference under the bill, and clarifies that the application of the preference to competitive sealed bids and competitive sealed proposals. The sponsors also shared an updated letter from USM withdrawing their opposition to the bill.
Yes, I did get that letter withdrawing the opposition this morning. Delegate Durzoni, anything you'd like to add?
I think Lindsay summarized it pretty well. We have made it a little bit more flexible and removed the University of Maryland system, and all good.
Do you want to move your amendment?
I would love to move my amendment. Yes, please. Can we move the amendment, please?
Second.
I have a motion and a second on the amendment. Further discussion on the amendment? All in favor of the amendment, say aye. Any opposition to the amendment? Okay, Delegate Guzzoni, would you like to move your amended bill?
Again, I'd be happy to. Please move the bill as amended.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second on the bill as amended. Any discussion? Delegate Kipke.
Thank you. Just a quick question. Does this give price preference, or is it just all things being equal, it'll go to this ESOP? Could you explain the benefit that the ESOPs will receive?
The price preference is still included. And Lindsay, please chime in if I start to screw up here, but the price preference is still included. And it's up to 5%.
So we're adding ESOP for these entities in addition to MBEs. Is that right?
The MBE program isn't a price preference, it's an overall participation goal.
Okay.
So are there any other price preferences that apply in this category?
So we do have two other percentage-based price preferences. In state law, we have one for small businesses and another for locally grown foods. So under the small business preference program, we have small businesses may receive a percentage preference of up to 8%, which is comprised of a base preference of 5% with an additional 2% for veterans-owned small businesses or 3% for disabled veteran-owned small businesses. And then we have the percentage preference of up to 5%, but you actually all just passed a bill raising that to 10% for food, locally grown food.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Further discussion? We have a motion and a second. All in favor of the amended bill, say aye.
Aye.
Opposition to the amended bill? Seeing none, we'll move that along to the full committee for a vote. The 1027.
So this bill establishes the work group to study implementation of a statewide 311 non-emergency telephone system. The sponsor of the bill indicated that there should be amendments adopted to match this bill with the Senate bill, which did just get reported out favorable with amendments. There were two amendments on that. One was adopted in subcommittee, which strike the reference to it being a statewide 311 system and said references it as an expanded 311 system. And excuse me, removes the reference to it being a telephone system. So it'd just be a non-emergency system. And the second amendment makes the Secretary of DO-IT rather than the Secretary of MDEM chair the work group and requires DO-IT with the assistance of DLS to staff the work group rather than MDEM.
Okay, thank you. Someone want to move the amendments?
Move the amendments.
Second.
All right, amendments have been moved and seconded. Delegate Chisholm?
Just want to know if that amendment cleaned up the fiscal note. Not that it's huge, but there was a $50,000 fiscal note.
Yeah, that fiscal note was for MDEM to hire a consultant to support the work group. So since they're not doing it, it shouldn't be a problem. I assume that DO-IT said they could do this with existing resources or at least with the help of DLS resources.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, on the amendments, all in favor of the amendment, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Will someone move the amended bill?
Move the bill as amended.
Second.
Second.
Motion and a second on the bill is amended. Any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call for a vote. All in favor of the amended version of House Bill 1027, say aye.
Aye.
Opposition to 1027. Okay, we'll unanimously move that onto the full committee. House Bill 1309.
I don't know if Delegate Wu is here. I don't think so. So this bill requires beginning in 2026, each local school system to comply with the state minimum cybersecurity standards, biannually conduct a cybersecurity maturity assessment, biannually report compliance to the Office of Security Management, beginning June 30th, 2026, and retain sufficient cybersecurity staff as specified. The bill requires DO-IT to assign at least 3 information security officers to support local school systems compliance with these requirements, and fiscal or compliance audits conducted by the Office of Legislative Audits must be guided by DO-IT's minimum cybersecurity standards. Again, on this one, the sponsor indicated that there'd be amendments coming. I don't have those amendments. I will note the bill does have a high fiscal note. The amendments are supposed to be.
I move to hold the bill.
Yeah, Delegate Wu's not here and we don't have any answers to any of the questions. Is anyone here to speak to this bill? Okay, let's just hold it and move on. House Bill 468.
This bill, a lot of you might recognize that this is pretty similar to a Department of Labor departmental bill, which was House Bill 82 from earlier this session. The bill transfers the Cyber Maryland program, including the Cyber Maryland Fund and Cyber Maryland Board from TEDCO to the Department of Labor. The bill repeals mandated funding for talent pipeline management and an additional discretionary authorization, expands programs required activities, including new competitive grants or contracts, authorizes a fiscal 2026 discretionary appropriation for new grants, requires the governor to include an appropriation sufficient to run the program beginning in fiscal 2027, requires unspent balances of certain programs and special funds be transferred to the Cyber Maryland Fund annually, authorizes additional uses for the fund, adjusts the composition of the board and members' terms, and makes technical and conforming changes. There are amendments that I circulated on this bill that match the bill to the Senate cross file, which is being reported out with a unanimous vote from EEE. The amendments alter the language for the awarding of competitive grants or contracts under the program, authorizes rather than requires the governor to make certain appropriations, requires the program to seek alternate funding sources from sources other than the state to supplement the fund, repeals the requirement that unspent balances of certain programs and funds be transferred to the Cyber Maryland Fund, requires the board to adopt bylaws on membership rather than specifying this in statute, requires the program in conjunction and in collaboration with certain entities to report on cyber workforce program activities, establishes the intent of the General Assembly that amounts awarded in grants and contracts may be allocated for certain cybersecurity clinics and specifies the goals of those clinics, and that the balance of the fund be used to implement initiatives approved by the Cyber Maryland Board, and then alters the effective date of the bill. That was raised in the fiscal note about the transfer of the program needing to align with the fiscal year.
Delegate Forbes is not here, but I see we do have someone from Cyber Maryland, Mr. Mo.
Yeah, but Mindy, would you like to go first? Mindy from TEDCO?
Oh,
I just
Mindy,
want to kind of
hi.
make sure that we.
Mindy, go ahead.
Certainly, thank you, Delegate. So TEDCO is fine. The amendments that EEE is voting out or has voted out are consensus amendments that TEDCO and Labor, the stakeholders, and Senator Hester and Delegate Forbes worked on collaboratively. And we are very comfortable with those amendments and support them moving forward.
So I don't forget, let me go ahead and move the amendments. Do I have someone who can move them?
Second.
Okay, amendments have been moved and seconded. Mr. Mo?
Putting my Cyber Maryland and Department of Labor hat on, we are very supportive of the amendment changes, like what Mindy said, out of EEE. That's all we have to say. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Delegate Shalega.
Are these amendments what came out of the Senate? I was confused on that.
Yes, they are. The bill's not out of the Senate yet. It's being reported out by EEE with these amendments.
Okay, so what we're doing makes it a true
Conforms.
cross file.
Yeah.
Yes.
And everybody's in agreement with them. I did want to ask about, it says that the program on page 5 of 10, the program shall seek alternate funding sources to include cost sharing or cost matching agreements from sources other than the state. What are we talking about there?
So philanthropy or federal grants in terms of for workforce development on cyber related jobs or education, things like potential scholarship for students in Maryland, as well as funding for registered apprenticeships and job placement programs.
Okay, and then later in the bill, it says if that's not spent, it'll be transferred back to the fund.
I believe those sections are struck out in the versions from that is coming up from the Senate.
Oh, the amendments strike those?
Yep.
Because we wouldn't want to be getting funding sources and then not guaranteeing that they will be spent on the purpose that they were intended. So you've taken care of that. It's going to be a lockbox, so to speak.
That's sort of like where the amendment, yes, that's what the latest version from EEE in the Senate would do.
Okay, so that's not the version that I have, Lindsay? Or does it say that in our version?
The version that you have should be the version from
Let me
EEE.
see. Did you say page 5? I'm looking at the
Page
final
5
version
talks
right now.
about the funding alternate funding sources But then later, when Lindsay was going over it, she said that funds that aren't spent can be transferred somewhere else.
Yeah, so those are two different sections. So there is a Cyber Maryland fund that is kind of like a lockbox that if we get additional funding, it will be part of the Cyber Maryland fund. And there was a different section that has been struck out, and that is section M that you can see in bottom of page 5 and 6 that have been struck out. So that was the part that funding that was originally given to those programs will no longer be pulled back.
Delegate Szeliga, are you looking at HB 1468 or SB 867?
I'm looking at what Lindsay sent us, which is, thank you for pointing it out, SB 867. So
Okay, that's the one we should be looking at.
that's
Yep.
the one I'm looking at. So, and it does, exactly what you said. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. The amendments have been moved and seconded. All in favor of the amendments, say aye. Any opposition to the amendments? The amendments are adopted on the amended bill. Do I
Move the
hear-
bill as amended.
Second.
All right, got a motion and a second on the amended bill. All in favor, any discussion? All in favor of the bill as amended, say aye. Any opposition to the amended bill? Seeing none, we'll move that one along unanimously to the full committee. And that takes care of our agenda for today. Lindsay?
I will just note quickly on that last bill, because it does depend on action in the budget. We are going to have to wait for appropriations approval before voting that in full committee.
Thanks for the
And-
reminder.
And I have a quick question on it.
Uh-huh.
How is this, are we looking to eventually like maybe merge it with 82 eventually, or how are we gonna settle that difference?
I understood from the Department of Labor that they were supporting this bill and didn't expect their bill to be moving.
Got it. Thank you.
Delegate Szeliga?
Does it still have a $3 million fiscal note?
Yeah, that's what Lindsay was saying. It's in
Right.
the budget, but we still have to get appropriations approval.
Is that a 3 million a year? It's not a one-time, is it?
No, I don't believe so.
Okay,
Ongoing.
thank you.
It's annual, it's an annual appropriation.
As it stands, it is annually 3 million.
Okay, seeing no other hands, I'll go ahead and adjourn the meeting. Thank you, everyone.